On the show this week, we welcome Val back as she's been gone for the last couple of weeks. And what better way to welcome her back than by picking a great movie, a classic, one that everybody's heard of, as we talk about Citizen Kane. Tracy's been very excited about this one as he used to teach film appreciation for 10 or 11 years a while back. He would teach this film every year and he would spend about a week on it. We asked him to take that week worth of material and condense that down into 1 hour, and he does a pretty dang good job. He breaks it down for us why this movie was so crucial and revolutionary in the world of movie making and why it still endures to this day. In addition to that, we talk all about what we've got coming up for the month of July as we talk about movies where groups are reuniting, because everybody's reuniting this summer. And we also talk next week about our favorite Westerns as Staff Picks makes a return. We're excited about that. Now, right now, we want to ask you to like this video, to go ahead and share it with your friends. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and click the little bell for YouTube to notify you when we've got new videos up. And in the meantime, enjoy the show. It's happening all right now on Movies That Make Us. Hello and welcome to another episode of Movies That Make Us. I'm Jake.
I'm Tracy.
And I'm Val.
She's back.
Hey.
She's back.
Apologize. My neighbors are doing some construction on their house. So that means there are people outside and my dogs are going a little bit crazy. So I'm gonna try and keep that on the down low, but dogs. Yeah.
Dogs are gonna do what dogs do. You can't really.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's good. I mean, we'll work with it. I was gonna say that's great. Like, yeah, that's fantastic. It's not necessarily.
No, I'll try and mute as much as I can, but yeah, dogs.
Well, it is so great to have you back, Val. Obviously, the show goes better when all three of us are here. But we've hit. What's also great. It's been the last couple of weeks not having you here. What's been really good is that you've been out traveling, which is awesome because we're at a point where that's something that is easier, more accessible, and safer to do than it has been for the last year or so. And so it's fantastic.
Yeah, something that me and my fiance decided at the beginning, well, I guess spring, is that we decided that once a month during the summer is we would get in our cars and go somewhere.
I love that.
And because I really like experiences, he really likes traveling. And so we've been doing that. I don't know that all the places that I've gone I would return to because there is people out there. There are people, there are people everywhere. And I went to Vegas with my friend Yen, and it was like, I was very happy with all the people that were wearing masks. There were a lot of people wearing masks, but there were so many people, and it was like 100 degrees. I don't know that I want to go back. Oh, wait, I am going back there to see Bill Burr for the 4th of July weekend, but
maybe it'll cool off by then.
I'm going to be watching Bill Burr and then we're heading out the next morning. But no, it's really cool to get out there and travel and do some things. And I do like that a lot of people are doing it responsibly. But I think people are just so happy to be out. And I'm so happy to see people in the movie theaters because I've been to see a lot of movies lately. I get to see Black Widow this week and I get to see Fast and Furious this week. So I'm super excited. Yeah, it's just, I'm so happy about movie theaters right now.
My wife and I went and saw In the Heights last weekend, and it was great because it almost felt like the before times. And it, there were people in the theater, there was cheering and there was clapping. And I was like, yeah, this is what I've missed. So, but there were also, what was nice is when we bought our tickets, the 2 seats on either side of us were X'd out so people couldn't buy them. So like for me, it's the best of both worlds. I want people in the theater, but you don't want them next to you, like on top of me or next to me. Yeah, exactly. So
I did think that movie was about 40 minutes too long.
Really?
I feel like, I know I really enjoyed it, but I feel like it was the Die Hard of musicals. It was like, we're going to write 42 songs and we're going to use 42 songs. We are going to put everything in here that we've ever wanted to put in a musical, every kind of dance move, we're walking up walls, we're dancing in pools, where it's like every musical, everything was in there. I did enjoy it. It was a very enjoyable movie, but
I think they even cut 2 or 3 songs from the Broadway.
It didn't seem like it.
Yeah, it is a long movie. It's a long movie. So yeah, but
go see
going
it.
to the theaters is great, and people need to go out. We need people back in the theaters if you feel safe, and I think more and more people are. I know when I go out to the store or I go any place, there are definitely more and more people that are feeling safe to be out. And I agree with, like, going someplace crowded, you need to be prepared for that, because we haven't been in big crowds of people for a long time. But like, even theme parks on both coasts now are at 100% capacity. You need to be, it takes some preparation to feel like comfortable with that again, because you're going to see a lot of people. But I think it'll take us less time to get used to being around a lot of people than it did to get used to not being around a lot.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. And speaking of that, we're going to be around each other soon.
Yay!
Yes. Our biggest theme for July is togetherness. I don't know if that's really a theme.
Should we talk about all movies where people come back together that have been separated?
I'm good with
that. We could do that. There's plenty of them out there. We could talk about each of us pick one. Yeah.
I like that.
That'd be fun. Because I think that's going to be a theme for a lot of people this summer.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a great thing. But yes, next week we will be recording in the same room together. We had kind of teased doing that this week, but we had another commitment that came up right before our normal recording time that you guys have to check out Matinee Heroes next week as we recast all of the Lord of the Rings.
Oh my gosh. When that list came in, I was like, oh my gosh. That is a lot of people to recast, because usually he caps it. He caps the number, but with Lord of the Rings, like, how do you cap it at 7?
Yeah.
I mean, I could have, but you know.
And I think my favorite moment was when we sat down getting ready to record, and they said, let's see if we can keep this under 2.5, 3 hours. And Val's well, first he said 7 hours, and he was joking, but still, we were like, that wasn't. So we took on the challenge, and we got it.
I think my episode with him, which was the first one,
Yeah.
I think it was like 2.5 hours. I do think we went. We went really long. Yeah.
Yeah, mine was pretty long too. And yeah, if you guys haven't checked it out, Matinee Heroes this month, we each did an episode on one of the Lord of the Rings movies. Val did Fellowship of the Ring. I did Two Towers. Tracy, your episode just came out this morning as we're recording this, Return of the King.
Yep.
So you guys got to check that out. And then next Saturday will be the big recasting that they're doing. So it was fun. I had more fun recasting it than I thought I would. But we're definitely some challenging picks.
It was intimidating because that cast is so good.
Yeah.
Well, when we talk about movies that make us, like, for me, I mean, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit. I know not a lot of people like the Hobbit movies, but I do. But Lord of the Rings is just, it's up there.
Yeah, I agree.
Totally.
I agree. And we need to do our own episodes on Lord of the Rings, and we need to, but we got to plan that out.
We got Larry. We need.
Well, not like right now, Val. We just did 3 episodes. I was thinking.
So in like next
down
year,
the road,
next year with our friend Larry Curtis.
Yeah, we got to get Larry on when we do.
He's got so many great stories because he was there as they were shooting these movies. Right. So yeah, that might be a 3-hour episode.
It might be one that we break into 3 episodes, like record it all at once. Like we'll do it like the movies. We'll record it all at once. And
there you go. Chunks,
There we go.
But speaking of big movies, we're doing I think this is as big as it gets as far as like name. When you say the name of the film that we're talking about today, everybody kind of, I mean, they've at least heard of it. It's up there. So we're talking about Citizen Kane today. And we did this kind of back to back with Paddington because of the whole story that was about a month ago that Citizen Kane, they unearthed a review from a reviewer that was a negative review, and that brought them down from their 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. And then that put Paddington 2 in the #1 spot as the best reviewed movie on Rotten Tomatoes with the most reviews and 100%. But since then, because we're slow on getting this stuff out sometimes, since then it's been dethroned. And the #1, I was trying to figure it out, and I think the #1 right now is Toy Story 2. Which I'm okay with that.
I actually agree with that pick a lot.
That 4 was really good, and a lot of people really say 3's better, but to me 2 is the
to me 2 is the best one.
I just remember when 2 came out because Toy Story was so revolutionary, I guess, as far as animation goes, because it was the first computer animated movie that made it big and that was really good. And it was like, how do you top that? And when Toy Story 2 came out, it was like, oh, you top it by making the animation better and the story better and just everything better. And then
I was going to say that might be the first just rip your heart out Pixar film.
Yeah, I think it, and we should just we should do an episode on Toy Stories.
Yeah.
But there were so many things that happened with Toy Story that changed the course of storytelling and animation for all animated pictures.
Right.
And just movie telling in general, because I would really like Toy Story or any of the Toy Stories to win outside of an animation category, because I think the acting and the writing is right up there, with that. I feel I feel strongly about the Toy Stories for sure.
Yeah, I agree. But we're not talking about Toy Stories on this episode, even though we just...
Unfortunately. You guys are going to hate me.
I don't think we will. I won't.
Okay.
I know, and we've talked about this.
I mean, it's not going to be the first time.
So... Citizen Kane is one of those movies that I think if you're into movies, you need to see it at least once, because of how big an impact it's had on movies going forward. But we'll talk about whether or not that means that you have to enjoy watching it over and over again. And so let's talk about Citizen Kane. When we talk about this, Tracy, I said a lot of people will say this is the greatest movie ever made. And you always kind of slowly raise your hand up when you say that.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you say that this is the greatest movie ever made?
So,
not that I'm saying that's such a controversial thought, by the way, I'm just asking.
It's not the most entertaining film, even though it is very entertaining. It is not a popcorn flick at all. But especially when you know the history of this movie and what Welles and his cinematographer Greg Toland did, along with just the whole story. You've got this movie written about a media conglomerate of William Randolph Hearst. You've got, you're making kind of his life story without his permission. Then you add in the groundbreaking cinematography. This is the first film that really shot with really wide lenses and got deep focus. A lot of those scenes are just, you can pull a still frame from this and hang it up on a wall. I mean, it's just gorgeous cinematography. One of the first films to show ceilings. The amount of craziness that Welles had to do. He got full permission to make the movie how he wanted at first, and then later started to lose that, and the amount of trickery, and we can get into that, the amount of things he had to do to keep the studio off his back, the fact that this movie got just destroyed by the media run by William Randolph Hearst. It could have just faded into obscurity and it was rediscovered. There's so many reasons why, on a technical aspect, on a filmmaking aspect, as a historical aspect, this one is, to me, I've seen this probably more times than just about any other film. A lot of that is because I taught film for 10, 11 years, and I dedicated an entire week to Citizen Kane. And it was really fun because a lot of the kids were like, yeah, I've heard of it. Meh. And it's black and white. And one of my classes was in the morning. It started at 7:30 in the morning. So that's tough for college kids. But the majority of them afterwards were like, okay, I respect that film. I understand why it's so great.
Yeah. So you brought up the William Randolph Hearst bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which Orson Welles basically went to his grave claiming that it was not based on William Randolph Hearst, that there were a couple of things that they kind of cherry picked out of his life to put in the film, but that by and large, it was not meant to be about Hearst.
Mm-hmm.
And that, looking into the kind of the background on it, that's the claim, the official claim, right?
Right.
And Hearst believed, because someone had said that it was based on his life. So he never, I don't even think he ever saw it.
I don't think so. But Herman Mankiewicz, the screenwriter, actually lived on Hearst's property in a guest house for quite a while.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff. I don't think it's entirely based on Hearst, but I do not believe that this is just, there were a couple of things. Like, I think they knew what they were doing. They were trying to poke the bear, and they got the bear response.
Well, one of the weirdest supposed connections to Hearst is the Rosebud connection that is claimed. That I think Mankiewicz is the one that
one
makes
is
the
a little
claim.
out there for me. Yeah. For those that don't know, the rumor is that Rosebud is the nickname of a piece of or a part of his girlfriend's anatomy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that one's out there for me. I don't know that would actually be the case.
Yeah. In this movie, it's just a sled.
Right.
So, spoilers. If you haven't seen
spoilers.
If you haven't seen Citizen Kane, I mean, it's been out for a while, so we are going to spoil it.
Yeah.
Do you guys know who owns Rosebud?
No.
Steven Spielberg.
Oh,
like he owns the actual prop.
Owns the actual Rosebud sled. It is believed to be the only one that survived. All the others got thrown into the fire and burned. But there was allegedly one left, and that is owned by Steven Spielberg, which, talk about cinema grail. Holy crap.
I wonder if it's in his house here.
It wouldn't surprise me.
I'll go check it out, but there's, some paperwork.
Next time you're hanging out with Steven, go check it out.
I'm
surprised you didn't know that he had it, Val. You and Steven are so close.
Yeah, so close as in I look through his windows and then I get arrested. I don't know. Just kidding. I don't do that. That's not how I feel about celebrities. I
like that you always make a weird stalkery comment and then follow it up with, just kidding. I'm not really like that. Like, I don't really want to put Tom Holland in my backpack. But...
No, that would be fun, but I would get his permission first. Like, I wouldn't just throw him in there willy-nilly and run away. That's kidnapping.
Consent is key.
Yeah. And it wouldn't be fun if he was struggling, right? It'd only be fun if he was like, and look over there and let's take a selfie. And we got to have an adventure together. I don't like people to be around me that don't want to be around me. That's not fun at all.
Well, that's a good
That's
point.
every day for me. And so I would rather just hang out with people that want to hang out with me. So the thing about this movie is, and we say this a lot, like Tracy and I have both been to film school. So if you've been to film school or you've been in a film class or whatever, this is one of the movies that, I think every film school or film class, they have you study for very good reasons. And for that, I say I do respect it. When I went to film school at USC, we spent almost 3 weeks on it. And then we had to write a dissertation on how we think the things in the film have manifested other things in the film industry, right? And so there are a lot of things in this movie, just like a lot of James Cameron movies, and I'll say that because not a lot of people love all the James Cameron movies, but they respect what those movies have done for filmmaking. And to me, I think this is basically in that same vein, is that there were so many things that were done in this film that were ballsy. I'm just going to say it. They were super ballsy at the time for a filmmaker to do, especially Orson Welles. He didn't shoot as much film as other filmmakers at the time, but he was lengthy in his filmmaking because he did want to experiment and try. It wasn't because he was, I think, what's the word I'm looking for? He wasn't a conceited filmmaker.
Right.
But he wanted to experiment. He wanted to push the envelope. He wanted to see the farthest he could go. So he wasn't a Hitchcock, but he was almost as expensive, right? And so Orson Welles to me is really fantastic. I haven't seen this movie in 25 years. 25. And so I feel like my brain has switched gears about why I love filmmaking. I still respect a lot of things about this film, but it was really hard. I don't know that, to me, a movie that stands up the test of time so that you don't have to explain it for somebody to really respect it and enjoy it, says something. And I do think that this is one that an audience now, just the way that our brains have been manipulated by our current technologies and how quick everything happens with all the zips and bangs and booms and all of that, to watch this movie is very difficult unless you understand what's behind it. And so it took me a minute while I started watching it again to say, okay, I've got to switch over here. And remember all the things that I had learned in film school. And I don't remember all of them. That was a long, long time ago. But those things I respect. And again, like the cinematography, I'm right there with you. Like you could, if you watch this film and you shut off all of the dialogue and you just freeze framed your TV, you would see something beautiful. And we don't get it at the now of what big of a deal it was for the widescreen. You know, we don't, because we get that every day, whatever, you know. But at that time, if you really slow your brain down and you remember how hard it was to do that on film with these cameras, they didn't have all of the lighting and the tricks that we had. You really had to wait for that shot. You really had to have people that knew what they were doing to get the shots they did.
Especially because to get that deep focus where the foreground, the midground, and the background are all in focus all at the same time, you've got characters and cameras moving in that space, it requires a lot of light.
Yeah.
And the cameras were nowhere near as sensitive as they are now.
Yeah.
So what they had to do is they had so many lights running off of a couple of generators. The best boy, who's the electrical guy, they actually paid a guy, and this is a true story, they paid a man to stand behind him with a 2x4 in case he started to get electrocuted, they could knock him out of the way because they were so worried about how much energy
this
was doing.
If you see him starting to get electrocuted, you need to hit him.
You just
real hard with this 2x4.
Val, he's fine. Oh, sorry. I felt like it
sorry,
was.
I
saw a fly. No, not. That's not.
Yeah, like it was the things that they had to do, and it wasn't like they had a handbook on you know, this is what this person did in this movie, so let's try that. They were figuring it out on their own, and they didn't have a screen where they could just play it back and watch it. Like they could have shot a whole day and thrown it in the trash because the things that they were trying to do weren't working, but they were working. And like this was, I don't know if this is what you learned from this in your classes or what you taught about this, but just the pull focus in general. Is, I mean, the opening of the movie, it's all pulled focus, and how to do that and create a different look on something that's not actually there, but you are manipulating with the focus.
Yeah, and they were doing compositing even back then. Like they're shooting through glass in order to make backgrounds and foregrounds. And
I mean, it's a lot of what Disney did with animation. You know what I mean? It's tricking the eye to think that something's there that's not there because they just didn't have they didn't know how to do that yet.
Well, the other thing that blows me away too is this is Orson Welles' first feature film. Like to come in here and to do what he did, and of course he had amazing talent. You know, Greg Toland, Herman Mankiewicz, he's set up for success. And the reason that Toland volunteered to be the cinematographer is he said, I knew that you don't really know what you're doing, so you're going to allow me to do what I want to do.
He's going to get to do his job.
You don't know better.
Exactly. And so he's like, there's all this stuff I wanted to try, but I've never had the chance, and you're my ticket to be able to do that. And it worked out beautifully.
And that's different than working on a Hitchcock movie, because you could be a cinematographer, but you're not doing anything. Because Hitchcock, he had his hands in everybody's nonsense. He just loved to hear himself talk in every aspect of filmmaking.
So Jake, I'm curious, what were your thoughts when you, because you didn't, and this is not a slight to you, but you haven't gone to film school.
I know you guys bring it up all the time. You both went to film school.
I've never
gone.
No, it's better that you didn't. Our brains were ruined.
So what? And I've heard that from a lot of people that have gone to film school, that you just watch movies differently, and
you do. You got to get out of the film school mode. Yeah.
For me, what was really interesting is I've seen a lot of older movies, and I like a lot of older movies. I often talk about Frank Capra as one of my favorite directors because I just really like a lot of the stuff that he's done. This felt so different than a lot of those older movies, even though it's from that same time frame. And part of, I think, what felt different, you talked about the set pieces and things like that. There was a lot of the scenes where it just felt more real. When you watch a lot of older movies, everything is on a set, and it feels like it's on a set. Like, even if you go back and watch It's a Wonderful Life, for example, the exterior shots are still on a set, and it feels like it's on a set for a lot of them. And this didn't.
I may be the only person that doesn't like that movie, but I don't like this. It's a Wonderful
That's okay.
Life.
No, there's a lot of people that
That's
don't
fine.
like it. I love that movie, but I understand there's a lot of people that don't, and I get why people don't like it. But just by comparison, when you watch it, it feels like everything is shot inside of a set. This one
Yes.
didn't, and it felt
Yes.
more modern. This felt more like a modern movie that was shot in black and white than
Mhm.
it felt like an old black and white movie. And I think that a lot of that had to do with what you guys were talking about, even though and you did bring up the ceilings. And I know that that's a really big deal because he was the first one that showed ceilings on the set and everything. And some of them did look really, really fake. I'll be
There were
honest,
some. Oh yeah.
but
Go ahead.
it was still, by and large, I feel like it had more of a feel of a modern film than a lot of other films from that era do. And
So
at the same time, didn't, like Val said, like it doesn't go quick like a lot of the other, like a lot of our newer films do.
I still find it. I love the story though, and I've thought about this before. I would love to see like a really intelligent, really well thought out comparison between Citizen Kane and The Social Network. Because
Yeah.
there's a lot there where you've got this ego-driven character who's trying to build himself up, and then his downfall. I think that would be a really interesting kind of comparison with David Fincher.
You should like lead that as a panel next year for our remote con.
Oh yeah,
that would be really cool.
Okay, done.
I mean, you could get like Blake and Craig and a bunch of people that have your same brain, similar brain on there. Yeah. But that would be awesome.
The thing that's so great about this is, so you've got Orson Welles. He's 24 when he starts making this movie. He's a theater actor. He did, of course, The War of the Worlds, which just set the world on fire. People thought that this was a real alien invasion because it was so well done. So RKO is the theater. Hang on, let me move the cat there. So RKO comes to him, and a lot of film studios are coming to him saying, "We want you to work for us." RKO is a small little company. They do not have a big backing. They're not MGM. They're not United Artists. And they say, we can give you something that nobody else will, and we'll give you full creative control, which set Hollywood on fire. So many people were pissed that Orson Welles didn't have to go through all the things that they had to go through. They've been doing this for 20 years, and they still don't have creative control. And so it's interesting because when this film, it was nominated for 8 or 9 Academy Awards. It only won 1. But every time it was mentioned during that broadcast, it was booed. Like a chorus of boos are coming down. So he's upset the Hollywood establishment. He's upset the media mogul. And now it's kind of weird because we have these big conglomerates. You've got Disney, you've got Time Warner, you've got
and that's about it.
Massive corporation. William Randolph Hearst was that powerful, except it was one man. Like he owned like 90% of the newspapers across the country, and that's how people got their news. And to piss that guy off, and then when that guy goes on a concerted effort to try and shut down the movie, he went to RKO and he said, "I will pay you everything that you have spent on this movie if you destroy the negatives." And RKO almost did it. And eventually they thought, no, we're going to stick with Welles. And so then it was like game on. Hearst was having his reporters write these newspaper articles about what a disaster this movie is, how horrible this movie is going to be. Then when the movie came out, they all hated it because that's what their boss wanted them to do. So like I said, the fact that this movie survived, to me, that says how good this movie is. It really does.
Commercially at the box office, I think they ended up losing 150,000, which at the time was a lot of money.
A lot of money, especially for a small studio.
I mean,
a lot of money to me.
I was going to say at this time for me, it's still a lot of money.
I'd take $20.
Studio, it was a lot of money back then. And a lot of that was because of Hearst not running ads for it and it just getting buried and Hollywood not being behind it. So it is really kind of miraculous that it has endured the test of time as it has. But the William Randolph Hearst thing is interesting. I think I've read a story where supposedly Orson Welles was in an elevator with him one time, and this was after everything was going on. And he offered him tickets to go see the show. And he said, obviously he said no. And as he walked out of the elevator, he shouted after him and said, Charles Foster Kane would have said yes to the tickets. And
I want to believe that so hard, because I think
yeah,
that is complete Orson Welles right there.
yeah. And this, talking about the character, Charles Foster Kane, this was really, I think, different for the time to have a protagonist in a film that you don't really like by
Right.
the end of the film.
Right.
Like, he is the main character. He is who the story is about.
Mhm.
And when we think about a protagonist, pro is typically like, we're for this guy.
Yeah.
But like, this was one of the first times, and I think it is very similar to Social Network. You get to the end of the movie and you're like, I don't know that he was really a good guy. Like, he kind of wasn't. And I mean, there's one thing about your person being human, but he was so flawed and so egotistical. Like, even when he's talking to his wife, that's the singer,
Susan,
and he's telling her, no, you're going to keep doing your singing lessons. And she's like, no, I hate it. I hate going out there and knowing nobody wants to hear me sing. Nobody wants to see me. And he's like, no, you're going to do it because I'm not going to be made a fool of. Like, everything was about him. He didn't care whether she enjoyed doing it. She was a singer. He was now with her. She was going to be one of the most renowned and best singers in the world. Or, I mean, he was going to do everything in his power to make that happen.
Yeah. And in a lot of ways, Welles mirrors Kane. Welles ended up at the end of his life being a very shell of what he was, and very bitter and very angry about
how his blame him? Like he was. Yeah, I mean, back then to not be accepted in, there's been a lot of witch hunts in the film industry for now it trying to be like so, inclusive and all this stuff, and like it was, I mean, but not that, it was more than that. It was if you didn't like what we wanted to do, there's usually 3 guys that ran everything, and you had to really change your moral compass if you wanted to be a filmmaker, and not in a good way, like not in the right way. And so if one big guy with money says that this one person isn't welcome here, you're done. You're done. And that, I mean, that's comparable to like when Spielberg came up. Like he was this young guy that got taken under a wing, and he was given so many things that none of these other filmmakers that were coming up at the same time were getting. And he wasn't liked at first. People were like, who is this punk kid that keeps getting all of these TV shows and these movies? And, he hasn't had to work as hard. Well, that doesn't mean that. That just means super talented. So stop being so butthurt and start doing something good,
Yeah.
And I think George Lucas had a similar experience coming up where everybody, especially doing Star Wars, and it was like, this is stupid. This is for kids. Nobody's going to want to watch this. And then,
but at the end of his life, I mean, Orson Welles was doing like Notre Dame documentaries. He did a voice in the Transformers film. He was doing like bacon commercials. I mean, this is.
People talk about, I read something online where somebody said, his life has been compared to like a celebrity's life lived in reverse, because where he ended up is where a lot of people start out doing really bad commercials for a local wine company or whatever. And then by the end making this masterpiece of a film, but he started that way.
Yeah. How do you
Yeah. But one of the things that I love and then we talked about with the elevator scene and why I think that this is true. So Hearst is putting all this pressure on RKO to pull the film. So the studio starts getting nervous, like, oh, maybe we should go look into this, even though we gave him creative control. And so they would send spies to the set. And Orson Welles told everybody to tell them that what they had shot was test footage, even though at the very beginning you have the newsreel stuff. He was like, no, those are just test pieces. We're just testing. And then when they came to the set, he was like, we don't work while they're here because we don't want them to know what's going on. And so they would play softball games. Orson Welles would do like magic tricks to entertain the studio until they left, and then they'd get back to work. I mean, it's just.
So the spies are coming back and being like, we don't think they're making any movie. We don't know what they're doing over there, but it's not making a movie.
But he's a nice guy, so
we're playing softball games. He showed me a magic trick. We don't
All
know what's
I can think about is
there.
the card trick from Ant-Man.
But I'll tell you, the one movie I really, really wish he would have gotten to make was the one that he actually wanted to do before Citizen Kane, and that's to adapt Joseph Conrad's novel Heart of Darkness. and he wanted to do it in first person. And I think, man, that's one that in an alternate timeline, in an alternate universe, in the multiverse, that movie exists, and I want to see it. But
yeah. So I think if you break this movie down, if you just watch it because you like old movies, you know, you're that person that, and I don't mind slow movies, and I don't mind movies that I have to really pay attention to. I don't mind black and white movies. I don't mind movies with subtitles. Really, the only movies I don't like are like thrasher, bloody movies, and then the dubbed movies where it doesn't match your lips. It doesn't matter how good that movie is. I can't watch it. I'm sorry, but I think if you like old movies, I think you'll like this one. I think it does have all of those things, those charming bits and pieces that you liked about storytelling in the movies that came out during that time. And that they did spend a lot of time bringing you into the life of what they're about to talk about.
Yes.
They give you a lot of the surroundings. They give you a lot about the character right off the bat. You know, right off the bat, you are pulled into a place where you're trying to understand your surroundings, and you get it right away. But I do think if you aren't into old movies and you're not into that, you are going to have to break this movie down a little bit and know what kind of went into the making of the movie, and then you'll like it a whole lot more, because it was really hard for me to watch this time. Even knowing the things that I know, it was really hard for me to watch.
I think to me it's very similar to reading a lot of fantasy books now, a lot of modern fantasy books, which I enjoy. And, you know, if that's all you've read and somebody says, hey, go back and read Lord of the Rings, which is a great masterpiece, but it is paced so differently. And the amount of exposition that Tolkien does in that book is ridiculous. And the whole concept of show, don't tell that writers are always told is like thrown out the window. And this is very similar. Like, this is a really, really great movie, and you have to understand what makes it great. But like, if you don't like the old movies, like you said, Val, you go back and you watch this, you're like, this is just really boring, and I don't get it necessarily.
The thing that I love is this is not a plot-driven film. This is a character study. This is a character study, and we get in his head. And I love, there's a quote from Orson Welles, and he said one of the reasons because the first version of the script was called The American, and it was a little bit more generic character, and it was about the everyman who rises to power in America and falls, because in America we love to cheer people on as they're going to the top. Then when they get to the top, we can't wait to see them fall, and then we love to see them come back. You know, that's how Americans do it. And Orson Welles said one of the things that drew him to this is you cannot sum up a man's life in one word, and he said you can't even do it in one sentence. You can't sum somebody up because people are too complicated. But in the end, in a lot of ways, Rosebud does sum up Wells. It's what makes him tick. Kane is a character who is a sad, scared little boy who got lost along the way and never grew up. And that's what Rosebud is. Rosebud is a longing to go back, even though, and it's fantastic because he did not have an idyllic childhood. Like his mother, holy cow, that woman is stern. Like when Charles, screaming at him because he's out playing in the snow. But
no mushy goodbye when they take him away. She's like, I've had his bags packed for a week. He's ready to go. Take him.
I've had him packed for a week now. But if that is the best moment of his life, and I think a lot of times when you have childhood, you have that idyllic childhood, even if it's not idyllic to what everybody else was, you still have fond memories for it. You know, you still have that pullback to it. But I just love this slow unlayering. And I love the fact that we learn about Kane not by his point of view. We learn about Kane from all the people who loved him, who hated him, people that he was rival with. I mean, that to me is very interesting storytelling.
Well, and I think that moment, I don't know if he looks at it as the greatest moment in his life or the best moment in his life, but I think it's more of
innocence.
That was the moment before, like, I think it was the worst moment in his life when he had no control over what was happening to him. And I think he's trying to compensate through through the rest of his life that he has to control everything, because in that moment where he finds out he's being shipped away from his family, his home, everything that he's ever known, and there's nothing he can do about it, which is such a strange concept that like, oh, we came into this money and so we're shipping our son away and like he's just going to be gone. And he had no control over that. So he's going back to the moment before that when everything changed, and he's just remembering that one moment. And I think, but that's what drives him to, that's why he's collecting all the art. That's why he is making his wife a star singer, regardless of what she wants. That's, I mean, he tells them, you know, there's many times where he says like, I tell the people what they're going to think and what they're going to do. And I think it's that constant wanting to get control, because from that moment on, he was never going to not have control of his life again.
Yeah, absolutely. You nailed it, Jake. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And yeah. Well, all right, then. I guess we'll just wrap up the show.
Good night, everybody.
I mean, we're close.
But I think the acting is fabulous in this movie. I love Jedediah Leland. The scene where the penultimate scene when Cain has lost the election and everything is just crumbling in on him. And he goes back and he finds his former best friend drunk and passed out at the typewriter. And he had started to write a bad notice in the paper. And Kane's like, I'm going to finish it. And he finishes it exactly like how Leland started it. And they have that conversation, and he's drunk, you know, he's still drunk, and he's confronting Kane, the actor, and his name slips me all of a sudden, but he stayed up for 24 hours before filming that scene because he felt like that would make it a little bit more feeling like he was drunk. And he actually stumbles on the word criticism. I think it's criticism. He stumbles on the word. And then Orson Welles liked it so much, he improv the line of, I think you mean this. And then they ran with it. And so that was just a total mistake. But that scene, and the other thing, man, just the cinematography. You could spend an entire hour on just the cinematography. But one of the things that they did that's so interesting, and it's pretty standard now, but at the time it wasn't done. Everything was always shot eye level. The camera was always eye level. And with Kane, whenever we're looking at Kane, we have a low angle looking up at him, because then he looks more imposing. He looks taller. He looks like he's in control of the frame. He's towering over you. And especially when he confronts Susan, when she stands up to him and he yells at her, they have a reverse shot where it's like a steep, high angle looking down on her, showing how small she is, showing how frightened she is. And it grows throughout the film. As the film progresses, those angles get more and more extreme. At the very beginning, when he's a young man just starting off in the newspaper business, it's very much at that eye level, because he's kind of the fun guy who's just getting his life together. And then it just progresses in these camera angles. And it's something that psychologically you recognize and you feel it emotionally, but you don't actually like notice it at the time.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think Tracy could go on for
well, yeah, I mean, he taught classes on this, so I'm intrigued. Like, I'm here thinking, am I going to be tested later? But this is really cool. This is really neat. Like, I mean, I remember learning a lot of the same stuff, but I don't know that my film teacher at USC, that he was pretty cool, that talked to us about this, but he also, I think this is what's funny, is my film professor at USC that did this specific class also was a little bit like the main character of this movie. Like he would name drop people, and he was way more important. You know what I mean? Like it was, and you're going to think this and this, and I kind of push those boundaries. I know that's weird. That sounds
so
as
weird.
As a 17-year-old girl, I still was exactly about pushing the boundaries and not doing what was expected of me, I guess. Whatever anybody expected a 17-year-old girl from Utah to make, I did not make those movies in film school. And I surprised him a lot, but he did give me the respect of this film that it was about pushing boundaries. And so I would kind of throw that back in his face a few times. But yeah, so I think that your class may have been a little more fun than mine, although I giggled every time he would say like the first name of like a major director or actor, like they were best friends. And maybe they were. I don't, yeah, it would be Steven.
Yeah.
Steven. And
Yeah, but that's, when you do it, it's an inside joke that we all laugh at because we know that it's funny. But,
and I mean,
it's not fun anymore.
We did meet a lot of filmmakers from the industry in that class. So he could very well know these people, right? But it was just really funny for me. So it kind of reminded me when I was watching the movie and I would kind of look at him, I was like,
I can see why you like this movie so much, Professor
But I mean,
Wells.
when it comes to, the thing that we spent a lot of time as well, because as a new filmmaker, especially, the biggest thing that they want you to do is to map out your shot. And so you have to draw out, here's your scene, where's your lighting, where's your camera. Right. And we had to draw that out scene by scene, which is tedious. We didn't have a computer to do it on back then. We had to do it by hand. That's how old I am. Just kidding, Tracy. I know that makes you feel older. But
I was just sitting here thinking, wow, you are old. Just kidding.
I mean, we had computers, but like we had to do, here's your paper. Here you gotta draw everything out. This is what a square means. This is what a circle means, like on the shot. And for this film, it was okay. Freeze frame. Where's the light? Where's the camera going? Because in this film, being black and white, it was a lot easier to find that spot, but not to know where they were going, because he didn't follow logistics of what filmmaking was at the time. And so you could say, okay, the camera's here, and I think he's going to pan, but he goes through.
Right.
His lights, and you're thinking that his light. And so it was really interesting to think of what the science was of how the lighting was in this film. Because they were trying so many different things that we could sit there and talk about. I didn't know you could do it that way. And this was a movie made way before we, had ever thought about making a film, and so it was interesting that way.
You brought up a great point earlier, is there's no previs. So you weren't seeing the film on a computer screen before you even shot a frame, which they can do now. And they didn't have monitors. They're shooting on film. And so you've got to shoot the film. You've got to know, you've got to know. You got to have that down, because if you shoot on film and then you project it onto a screen, if your focus is off by the hair on some of these shots, it's going to be hugely magnified on this screen. And you're loading the camera in and out in a black bag that's light proof. You're sending it off to a lab to get processed. You're hoping the lab doesn't screw anything up. Then they gotta send it back to you. So you don't know what you shot for at least 3 to 5 days.
Yeah.
And you gotta keep going.
And we had to use this film because we had to do like a project for the end, right? That we had to shoot on actual film.
I did 16
and I helped write the script, and then I helped edit the movie. But of course, everybody wanted to direct. So we had like freaking 2 directors and like all this stuff. I'm like, whatever, I'll help. I helped mold it. I helped write it with this guy, and we both edited it. And a lot of the things we had to do was focus on lighting and focus on your pull focus. We had to pull focus, and you don't know, like, I'm just hoping that this director and this guy with girl with the camera, understood that as you pull focus for certain shots, you not only have to pull the focus, you have to move your camera back or forward. And in this film, again, you can say, okay, let's just take this 10 minutes of this film and talk about the technical aspects of it. And that's why I respect it so much, because you can learn how to do things from this film. And then, of course, we shot our film, which was only like 8 minutes. So I couldn't imagine it took us 2 days on the Universal backlot to shoot this film. And it didn't, the story sucked, but it actually turned out, it was a little overexposed, but it worked with the story that we were doing. But again, you're just crossing your fingers, because now we're like, okay, shoot it. We're watching it, replay it. Okay, do it again. But when you're doing film,
right,
we didn't have time to go back. We were screwed. We can't go back to Universal.
I had one where I shot for an entire day, and the film used to go through a little gate that would be right in front of the lens. I did not have it all the way over because, again, you're doing this by feel in the dark.
Yeah.
So half of my picture is just blown out and overexposed.
Yep.
And I couldn't use any of it, and that cost like $250.
Yeah.
Like, that sucked, you know?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's no joke back then, like making a movie, because you're spending so much money. Now we're spending money on special effects and all this other stuff, but we know, we've got 70 people to work on that where,
and you know what you've got once you shoot it.
Yeah. For the most part. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the technical aspects and what you can learn from this film, I respect it. I do like the story. It is very compelling. And Jake, like you said, there were so many moments about his life and how he became who he was with all of these very vulnerable moments that he doesn't like to actually acknowledge as being vulnerable. And so, yeah, it's a dynamic story and it's a technical marvel that we still keep learning from. But to me, it was still really, really hard to watch.
And to me, this is a movie I could just watch because I find the characters so fascinating.
I just think it's funny that it's this one and Sharknado. Like, it's just.
I have not gone back and watched Sharknado.
Sorry, I had to throw that out. I haven't been there in a while.
It was the experience of watching it with other people who were in a silly mood that made that movie. Like, I couldn't watch it by myself.
Would you watch it with Orson Welles?
Oh, dude, I would so watch Sharknado with Orson Welles in a heartbeat. Can you imagine the dialogue that?
I would watch that. I would watch you watching Sharknado with Orson Welles.
I'm telling you,
which Orson Welles? Would it be like young Orson Welles from Citizen Kane or Orson Welles from like the Muppets movie?
I think both. I think you should have the 23-year-old Orson Welles with like all of the ideas, and then the old grouchy one. Like, you should all be there.
And I think they would be totally on board with watching a movie with themselves. Like, I get to watch. Yeah. Like, that sounds great. Perfect.
But the other thing, like I said earlier, when you are learning about this character from all these different people's point of view, like Susan, the story with Wells and Susan ends with her leaving and going out to the car, and leaving him, and that's kind of like her triumphant moment. And we don't see his reaction until later in the movie when the butler is telling the story, Raymond. And that's when we see him go into this fit of rage. And that acting, to be a 24-year-old guy, acting like you're an old man who is just losing his shit, pardon the term, but he's going nuts and he's ripping shelves down and he's throwing pictures, but he doesn't, the physicality of it, you still believe that he's an old man. Like, because it's not over exaggerated, but it's there. Like, so many times when you're younger, you do the I'm an old man type of, it's just so over the top. And to be able to do that, the fact that I love this story, the makeup artist was, he hired the makeup artist who was the floor, the cleaner, basically. He was kind of the janitor in the makeup department. And he hired him because he saw that he was playing around with latex, and nobody had done latex before. So they did prosthetics to make Kane older instead of just makeup. And it's that kind of out of the box thinking, like, you know what, you're doing something cool. I want to work with you in order to make this movie.
Even though old Leland did not look very great.
No. This is early prosthetics. So yeah. But to me, this is so watchable to watch this guy who has this rise and the fall and the power that he tries to exert over people, and how he just is grasping at everything and can't do it, and everything falls apart at the end, and he's just this old man living alone in a mansion, and then he dies and they're just taking away his stuff in crates. Like, there is so much in that story, and that's the thing. Like we said, if you don't have that story coupled with the technical achievements, it doesn't last. It doesn't stand the test of time.
Yeah. I do think that it's interesting when you talk about the character himself. And one of the things that I kept thinking is, this movie was made back in the 40s, and how much of this is still applicable. How,
Yeah.
when we think of demagogues in our society, not that we've had any recently in any kind of prominent position, but when we think about them, like, how similar is it to this same story
Yeah.
of I'm going to
That's
control everything,
mhm.
and then they end up with nothing in the end. And anyway, there was a lot of things that I thought about as I watched it. It made me think, and I think that that's a great thing,
Mhm.
especially for a movie that you're talking about is 70 years old,
Yeah.
or no, 80 years old at this
80
point.
years. 80 this year. Yeah, it's the 80th
So
anniversary.
so with all of that being said, what do we give as a grade? And I almost feel wrong asking for a grade on a movie like Citizen Kane, but we're going to, because that's what we do on this show. So
Yeah.
let's let's start with you, Tracy. I know you're
We
excited
all
about
know
this
where
one.
I'm going with this.
Yeah.
We all know how this is going to end up. But to me, this marries the technical, it marries the creative, it marries the dramatic story. The musical score is fantastic. I mean, this movie is filmmaking. It's just sublime. And I think, and I try really, really, really hard not to be a film snob, because I was when I came out of film school. I was a film snob and I looked down on all these other movies. But to me, this is one, rewatching it this weekend, I was in love with it as much as I was when I was teaching it. And I was in love with it as much as I was when I first saw it. When I first saw it, I didn't get any background. We were exposed to the film and then we talked about it. And I remember going, I don't think I get this movie, but I like it. And that made me interested in learning more. And that's just deepened my appreciation for it. To me, this is if not the greatest, it's dang well at the top. It better be number 2. If you're gonna unseat it, it better be number 2. This is an A+ for me. This is a home run. This is one that even today I could watch and enjoy. It resonates with me.
What about you, Val?
Like I said, I respect the movie. There's a lot that you can learn from the movie. To me, it's not an A+. Sorry, Tracy.
That's okay.
But to me, it's a B. I definitely understand why it's so important. I understand why people say that it's the best movie ever made. To me, it has reasons to be, but I don't feel like it's the best movie ever made. But I definitely respect what it means, what it has done, and what you can learn from it.
And a B from you is still a really solid grade.
Yeah. I think watching this movie, and it is available to stream right now on HBO Max. So if you have that, it is available there. But yeah, this movie I think is up there. Last week when we talked about Paddington, and Tracy and I both gave Paddington and Paddington 2 an A.
Mm-hmm.
But we talked about it's a great movie, but is it film? And when you talk about a movie being film or cinema, I do think that Citizen Kane is in that realm, obviously, where there's just something more to it than just the movie and the story on the screen. And I think for that reason, for me, this gets an A. I don't know. It would be hard for me to say I'm going to go back and watch it again like next week or something like that. It's not one that I think I'm really
It's
just in
Friday
the mood
night.
to sit down and watch Citizen Kane. Like, I want to unwind. I'm going to throw this on, but that's not what this movie is, and I get that. And so
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's still an A. I think it's amazing. It's really, really well done. And I do think, rightfully so, if you're into movies and you're into film, this is one that you have to see at least once to have that experience and
Even if
see
you
it.
just watch it in order to be able to understand the old Simpsons jokes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of jokes about this movie.
If for nothing else, to understand The Simpsons, obviously that's reason enough.
One of my favorite I'm talking early Simpsons. I'm talking like the first 8-9 years, because it's been on for like 35 years now. But there's a scene where Mr. Burns is clutching his teddy bear, and it is shot for shot like the beginning of Citizen Kane, and he's like, and drops the teddy bear on the floor, and so then he says they have a flashback to when he's a kid and he's out in the snow. And he's like, la, 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 la. It's this little Mr. Burns. And he's like, his mom calls him over and she's like, would you like to stay here with your loving, caring family? Or would you like to go live with this loveless, cruel billionaire? And boom, he gets in the car and he pulls on sunglasses. He's like, let's roll. There's some great stuff, but
yep. So there you go.
If you haven't.
There's Citizen Kane. Next week, we will be doing our staff picks. And for the month of July, we're going to be talking about some great movies. I think that where you're getting together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, reuniting movies.
Movies.
Bringing the band back together.
Yeah, because we are bringing the band back together starting next week, and that's going to be a lot of fun.
And I'm just going to say right now, none of us should be able to choose Endgame. We've already talked about it, but it is one of the best reunited movies.
It is. Yeah, it's fantastic. But we've already done an episode on Endgame, so we're not going to.
So we're throwing that out there. You can go back and listen to our episode on Endgame.
Yep. I believe it was something McMahon boobs, I think was the name.
McMahon boobs. Yes, you're right. You're right.
We did it in the MPU.
That's
so
anyway, can I just say thank you guys for talking about a film like this? I mean, I love the fact that we talk about these fun and silly movies a lot of times. I mean, Jake and I covered Clifford, I mean, we did.
We've come a long way from Clifford to Citizen Kane.
But I love the fact that we're taking this like serious movie and really getting into the nuts and bolts and yet still talking about the humanity of it. It's not just the technical side of it,
That's what we do.
Right. But I'm really appreciative that you two agreed to do this one, because this to me, this is like Alan Cerny's Lord of the Rings. Like Citizen Kane to me is like my high point.
What you don't know is that because you chose this movie, you don't get to pick any movies for a year. So I hope you liked your pick.
All right. I stand by my decision.
I'm just kidding.
I stand by my decision.
But that's one of the things that I do really appreciate about our show and the movies that we've picked is we have really picked a lot of very different movies and very diverse movies as far as just different genres and things like that. And I think that that's awesome. Really, I mean, if you go back through our catalog of episodes, we're on episode 108 right now, you're going to find something for everyone. And there are so many different movies out there. We just want good movies to talk about and sometimes not good movies to talk about.
I have gotten so many messages over the last couple of weeks about our Bird movie. Because a lot of people just have never heard of that movie, and I'm so glad that we talked about it. That was one for me. Like, I'm glad you guys let me pick that movie but several people have messaged me and said, I love that episode so much. I knew nothing about that movie. I probably wouldn't have watched it if I heard who was in it, because it's just, but yeah.
That's cool.
That movie was
really cool. I love that.
I was glad that we watched it because my wife's brother just got engaged, and his fiance is a big birder.
Oh, nice.
And so when she was saying that, I said, "Oh, so have you ever done a big year?" Like, I knew a little bit, like enough to sound like I knew a little bit about what she does.
Yeah. And then she starts talking a different language and you're like, hold on. Like,
like this was not covered in the Jack Black
like when
movie.
you say one thing in Spanish and then somebody like jumps out like a whole conversation. Oh,
nope.
Yeah, but a big year if you haven't seen that. And that episode is one of my favorites as well. So.
Yeah,
that's one that was always on my list, but I had just never had an impetus to see. Kind of like Paddington 2 last week, that was I had heard good things, but I just had never watched it. So yeah,
it's been fun. It's been fun to kind of discover some of these movies too, because anyway, it's been a great time that we've been doing this remotely. I'm so glad to get back together and do it together in person. It will be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I think I've got most of the technical stuff figured out so we can continue to do video.
Yay.
We'll see. It might all fall apart, but we'll give it a try. We'll figure it out. But thank you, everybody, for listening. Please go to our YouTube channel, like this video, subscribe, leave comments. That helps others find it. And follow us on all the social medias, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We always appreciate a follow and a like there as well. If you have feedback for us, send it to podcast@moviesthatmakeus.com. And until next time, we won't see you at the movies. Rosebud.
This has been a Stolen Droids Media production.